Today, boys and girls, we will be learning about Benjamin Banneker. This is a photograph of Benjamin Banneker. You can see in the background that he has a telescope, and he has a book in his hands, and he's wearing a nice petticoat. So who was Benjamin Banneker? Benjamin was an almanac author, a scientist, a mathematician, a farmer, an astronomer, descended from enslaved African Americans. He grew up in Baltimore County, where he was one of 200 freed African Americans in a population of 4,000 enslaved African Americans and 13,000 whites. His grandmother taught him how to read, and this is where he learned to prefer books over play. Besides his grandmother, most of his education was self-taught, meaning he didn't go to school like you. He was referred to as the first Negro of science. He was praised by abolitionists for his work advocating for racial equality. November 9th, 1731, he was born. Benjamin is born in Maryland to Robert, who was an ex-slave, and to Mary, who was daughter to an Englishwoman and ex-slave, meaning his mother was a mixed-race baby. His mother being a mixed-race baby is the reason why he became so passionate about equality for African Americans. 1753. Clockwork. Benjamin creates a clock almost entirely out of wood. You can see a sample of the clock in the photo below. He had only seen two clocks in his whole life, a sundial and a pocket watch. This was the first striking clock ever invented, so Benjamin is credited with creating the clock. He created the clock based on his own drawings and calculations after studying the workings of a friend's pocket watch. It worked for 40 years until it was burned in a fire. We'll talk about the fire later. 1771. The Ellicott brothers. Benjamin becomes close friends with George and Joseph Ellicott. They loaned him books and instruments for observing the stars because they really thought he would like astronomy. He teaches himself astronomy and mathematics using the tools and books given to him by the Ellicott brothers. In 1788, with the help of the tools and books borrowed, Benjamin was able to accurately predict the timing and the eclipse of the sun. This is an example of an eclipse in the photo. 1775. The family farm. Benjamin inherits the family farm after the death of his mother, so he had to come back to the farm to help take care of his sisters. He builds a cabin with a skylight so he can study the stars and make further calculations. It is thought that this cabin is where he began to make the predictions for the eclipse mentioned earlier. February 1791. Surveying the capital. So Benjamin was hired by Major Andrew Ellicott, which is right here in this photo on the left. He is the cousin of George and Joseph Ellicott that we discussed earlier. And he was hired by this man to assist in surveying land along the Potomac River, which is in the photo in the right, in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is currently our nation's capital. So basically, Benjamin Banneker helped develop the nation's capital. The architect that was originally working on this project actually quit and took his plans with him because if he wasn't working on the project, he didn't want anyone to work on the project. But Benjamin was able to save the day with his great memory, and he was able to write up the plans again, which saved the city time and money. In 1792, he wrote his first almanac. Benjamin released his first almanac that was based on his calculations of celestial bodies. Celestial bodies are things like the sun, the moon, or the stars and planets. Benjamin sends a copy to Thomas Jefferson, who was the secretary of the United States at the time, along with a letter criticizing Thomas Jefferson of his pro-slavery ideologies. This means Thomas Jefferson liked that African Americans were enslaved. Between 1792 and 1797, he published his 6 almanacs. The almanacs include literature, commentaries, and fillers that were political in nature. Abolitionist societies from Maryland and Pennsylvania actually helped fund Banneker's almanacs. This is an example of an almanac that he wrote. In 1806, Benjamin sadly dies, and on the day of his burial, his house and all of its contents burned to the ground, including the first striking clock ever invented. This is just another photo of Benjamin. And here are our references or sources so that we can source information and avoid plagiarism. Thanks for listening, guys.